Hi everyone, David Price here. I've been getting a lot of requests for violin lessons lately, and I recently had a trial lesson with an older gentleman that I think you'll find really instructive. Bob came with questions I often hear from students. He wanted help with his vibrato and suspected some setup issues might be holding him back. We addressed those concerns with answers I commonly share, but as I watched him play, I realized vibrato wasn't actually his biggest challenge. Instead, I identified a foundational weakness that I believe is the most critical area for the majority of players to focus on first. I gave Bob some targeted homework on both his vibrato and this weakness, and I think you'll find it valuable for your own practice. Now, Bob's video quality isn't the best, but I've trimmed this lesson down to the most useful parts, and I'm confident you'll get a lot out of our interaction. Let's dive in. First idea, let's address the setup a little bit, okay?
Sure.
So the first thing I want to check is, are you able to hold the instrument by just putting head weight down and taking the left hand away? Is this possible for you to do this?
Let's try that.
Yeah, not too bad.
You know, I've often wondered, why can I do this?
Yeah.
And yet when I play, it seems to not be that comfortable or...
That seems pretty reasonable, what I just saw. What we do want to think about with setup is we want to be able to bring the head weight down and feel like it just stays there without feeling like we're putting too much counter pressure with the shoulder. So when you do that, I do want you to feel like you're resting head weight down. But I'm curious, do you feel like you're lifting up with the shoulder a lot in order to make that happen?
I probably, you know what, now that I think about it,
Yeah.
I think I do lift my shoulder. I think I'm
So,
lifting it up.
I think this is where most tension and most trouble starts with the violin, right?
Yes.
Now, your setup actually looks pretty good. So visually, I don't see that your shoulder is like lifting up a ton, which means your shoulder rest is probably adjusted fairly well. It's at a reasonable height. It fits you fairly well. However, the big danger of using a shoulder rest is that there is no real negative consequence for kind of clamping on it. And if we clamp here, the tension from our neck and shoulder is going to spread everywhere.
Yeah.
Make sense? So
yeah, because I've heard some people say lift, you know, the opposite of what you're saying, sort of. And I think I took that, and my brain sort of gets some tension in there by making, you know, trying to squeeze the violin to my neck.
You're not alone. Most violinists do it. It's something that we have to kind of wrestle with forever, trying to avoid this clenching with the shoulder. Yes. And I think it's a very important thing. And in particular with vibrato, if you have clenching here, you are not going to have complete freedom and flexibility here.
When you look at my violin, is it high enough?
You know, my angle's a little weird, but the height looks pretty decent. You want the strings to be parallel with the ground. That's kind of the goal. So you have a flat table to rest your arm weight on. And in order to get the strings parallel with the ground, the scroll needs to be pointed a little bit up. About the height of your nose is where we want it.
So like this?
Yep. That's right. And you want to adjust your hardware, your chin rest and your shoulder rest, to allow your head weight to come down and for the violin to just rest there. Make sense? So this is the first thing that I would be thinking about for you. In everything that I'm doing, can I support the instrument without lifting up the shoulder? And you might need to do a little bit of adjusting to your chin rest or your shoulder rest. You might not. It actually looks like the setup is reasonably decent. Now, as regards your vibrato, will you try to vibrate one more time? And I am curious if the base of the index finger, so the bottom part here, if you feel like there is complete freedom and separation from the base of the index finger and the neck of the violin.
Now there is, that you mentioned. Perhaps before I was touching the base a little bit to the violin. It should be completely free, right?
Completely free. However, I will say it can brush. So just because the base of the index finger touches is not necessarily the problem. If there's any sort of sideways gripping going on, though, between the thumb and the base of the index finger, that will pretty much completely kill the vibrato.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by sideways gripping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean pressure from the thumb going this way and pressure from the index finger going this way.
So they're sort of coming towards each other is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Kind of squeezing the neck together.
Yes.
That is something we definitely want to avoid.
I don't think that's too bad. Am I vibrating on the right side of the finger, on the inside? I'm on the right side?
I think you are. Yeah. Okay. I refer to that as the inside corner of the finger. I thought that looked pretty good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I don't think your vibrato is developing badly, Bob. I think it's developing nicely. Those were the two sticking points that I saw. I said, I think his shoulder is squeezing a little bit, which is making him not feel completely free. And then I was not sure about the base of the index finger. if it was clamping or not. And if the base of the index finger clamps, there will be a sticking point where you can't completely open up with your vibrato.
As my teacher perhaps has pointed out sometimes in his own way, it's a little bit of impatience on my part.
It could be.
For example, when you do your vibrato video.
Yeah. Bob, I think that's a pretty reasonable vibrato. I will also mention one other thing that I noticed as you were practicing it here. So you're practicing this exercise up in third position.
Yes.
I've seen this recommended from people before. Here's one thing that concerns me about it. I do feel like you're somewhat resting the violin on the base of your wrist here.
Some teachers recommend, you're right, some teachers recommend staying on the base of that.
I've seen this before. Let me tell you why I think it's somewhat troublesome. I think it does make it feel easier to get sort of the motion down.
Yes.
But it's not like we're only going to be vibrating in third position, right? And this teaches a very strict wrist vibrato rather than arm. And I personally, I don't want to restrict any of my joint motions, right? I don't want to make it really strictly hand.
Okay.
Or really strictly arm. In the beginning, I just want to create as much flexibility and freedom as possible.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And so with where you are in your progression with your vibrato, in particular, I would encourage you to sort of step away from third position and resting the violin on the wrist. Yeah. And you could just do it in first position. And I would love to see a little bit of arm involvement. And I don't even think I would really think intentionally about it. I would just go to first position and see if I can make this work. And in doing that, I would just make sure that the base of the index finger is detached and that your head weight can support the instrument, because you're not going to be able to rely on the instrument resting on your wrist. Yeah. I just think resting the violin on the wrist is a bad idea. Okay. Like you lose all flexibility. Yeah. You lose ability to shift reliably. When we actually play, we don't really want to do that at all. Let me have you write down the big ideas. So first big idea.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're using head weight to support the instrument and that the shoulder is not clamping. Big idea number 2, make sure the base of the index finger is completely free. Number 3, we're going to switch where you do your vibrato exercise down to first position so you're not resting the violin on your wrist. The final thing that I want to talk to you about is where I actually feel like you are weakest right now, which is in your method of tone production. And I actually have a really long series on tone. I have a 6-video series on tone production.
Wow.
And I would just watch that from beginning to end and do the exercises. It won't fit perfectly for you because the first 2 are really for beginners starting to pull out a straight bow. I would still watch them though if I were you, because the principles...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My teacher often has said correcting my violin in terms of my bow not being straight or being wiggling and waggling around and stuff like that. So you probably noticed some of that as well.
Yes. Yes. And I really feel like it has to do with whether you're holding on tight and pressing in order to get sound or hanging arm weight and pulling. And we have to get into this zone where we're just hanging arm weight in a very relaxed way and pulling sideways, right? Yeah, I mean, it talks about all the big principles, right? So like you need all of the joints, the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder to all be seamlessly working together to get that really to work. My homework for you would be to watch that first of all and get pretty good at the really basic exercises in videos 1 and 2. And then the exercise that I introduce in video 3, A-bows, is something that I just do pretty much at every lesson with every student. Like from book 1 to like they're going off to college, I'm still doing A-bows, which is just focusing on sort of like finding arm weight, relaxing the hand, and pulling in a relaxed way.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
You will see tons of progress from doing this exercise.
That's fantastic.
In conjunction with that tone series, I would also check out the bow exercise series, which will give you all of the exercises that you need to develop the dexterity that you need in the right hand to have flexibility and and fluidity for bow changes and stuff like that. And just add one at a time, but I start every practice session with these bow exercises. I would start with that. That's already a lot. I would imagine getting into the groove of all those bow exercises and the exercises on the tone series would take you a month or two. You know,
Wow.
At any point during the journey, if you want feedback, I'm happy to do one of these calls.
We could do a private lesson.
Yeah. And I can tell you, okay, you're doing this exercise wrong in this way, or this thing you should adjust.
Definitely.
I think you're doing a fantastic job.
I told my wife, as soon as I saw you and I followed, I said, this man is logical. He breaks it down and he's easy to understand.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I just had a sense that you were a good teacher. I felt that you'd be very helpful for me. And definitely, you give good advice and consistency, and you break it down into exercises that some teachers give and some don't. You seem to have an understanding of what needs to be done consistently.
Oh, I appreciate it, Bob.
Yeah, so thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out again. I'd be super excited to hear your progress after doing some more of the exercises.